Welcome to Ink and Evidence, where silence tells stories, and every clue brings us closer to the truth. From chilling crime cases to unsolved mysteries and secrets the world tried to forget, we uncover what lies beneath. If you dare to question, if you seek the truth, then you're exactly where you need to be. Tell us where you're watching this video from. Your feedback always inspires us. Stay tuned to solve the mystery, because the truth always leaves a trace.
Let's begin today's story, Death at Rosemere Estate. Chapter 1. The question Miss Marple asked beneath the Rosemere rain. The rain had been falling over Rosemere Estate since before dawn, not heavily, but with that steady patience which makes old houses seem older and secrets feel heavier. It silvered the long avenue of lime trees. It darkened the gravel drive to the color of wet ash. It gathered upon the carved stone roses that crowned the gateposts and slipped from petal to petal as though the estate itself were quietly weeping. Miss Marple noticed this before she noticed the police motor car. It stood crookedly near the front steps, one wheel sunk into the softened edge of the drive, its black bonnet glistening beneath the gray morning. Beyond it, Rosemere House rose through the mist with all the melancholy dignity of a place built for summer parties and remembered now for funerals. Its tall windows held pale reflections of the rain. Its ivy clung darkly to the walls. From somewhere behind the house came the restless murmur of water overflowing from gutters into stone channels. Miss Marple sat very still in the back of the hired car, her gloved hands folded over the handle of her small traveling bag. "A sad-looking place, miss," said the driver, lowering his voice, though there was no one near enough to hear him. "Yes," said Miss Marple gently, "though sadness in a house is not always caused by grief, sometimes grief merely uncovers it." The driver glanced at her in the mirror, uncertain whether this required an answer. Miss Marple gave him a mild smile and stepped carefully down onto the wet gravel. She had been invited to Rosemere by Mrs. Lydia Ainsworth, an old acquaintance from St. Mary Mead and now companion to Lady Rosemere. The invitation had been ordinary enough. A few quiet days in the country, some knitting, some village gossip, perhaps a walk through the famous rose gardens if the weather improved. Mrs. Ainsworth had written that Lady Rosemere had been rather strained of late, and that Miss Marple's calm company would be a comfort. But comfort had arrived too late. At the top of the steps stood Inspector Hale, a broad, rain-speckled man with a face made tired by early rising and human foolishness. Beside him hovered Mr. Pritchard, the butler, thin and upright, his mouth held so firmly shut that it seemed almost locked. "Miss Marple?" the inspector asked. "Yes." His expression changed, not quite into welcome, but into recognition. "I've heard of you." "People have a way of hearing things they ought not," Miss Marple said pleasantly. A faint crease appeared near the inspector's mouth. It might have been amusement. "Mrs. Ainsworth told us you were expected. I'm afraid you've come into a difficult morning." "So I gathered." Behind him, inside the open doorway, Rosemere House smelled of beeswax, damp wool, and lilies. That last scent troubled Miss Marple slightly. Lilies in a house so early in the day usually meant either a gardener with habits or a family expecting sorrow. The hall was large and dim, with portraits watching from oak-paneled walls. A marble staircase curved upward into shadow. On a long table beneath a gilded mirror stood a silver bowl of roses, their heads drooping from too much warmth, their petals a deep bruised red. A woman rose from a chair near the fireplace as Miss Marple entered. She was tall, beautiful in a faded, disciplined way, with silver hair pinned precisely at the back of her head. Her black dress was not mourning, not yet, but it had the air of having been chosen in readiness for it. "Miss Marple," she said, "I am Lady Rosemere." Miss Marple took her hand. It was cold but not trembling. "My dear," Miss Marple said softly, "I am very sorry." Lady Rosemere looked past her toward the rain-blurred windows. "Yes, everyone is sorry. It is the easiest thing to be." Before Miss Marple could answer, a younger woman came quickly from the drawing room, her face pale beneath untidy fair hair. "Aunt Alina, you must sit down," Dr. West said. "I shall sit when I wish to sit, Clara." The young woman stopped, wounded but obedient. Miss Marple noticed the ink stain on one of her fingers, the reddened eyelids, and the small tear in the lace at her cuff. Not a careless young woman, she thought. a young woman who had caught herself on something in haste. Inspector Hale cleared his throat. Perhaps introductions can wait. Miss Marple, since you are here as a guest, I should explain the situation plainly. Sir Julian Rosemere was found dead this morning. In the house, Miss Marple asked. No, in the South Rose Garden. Lady Rosemere's face did not move. Clara looked down sharply. By whom? The gardener, Abel Cross, at 6:20. He came to cut blooms for the breakfast room. Miss Marple turned her mild blue eyes toward the bowl of red roses in the hall. Those blooms? Mr. Pritchard's lips parted for the first time. No, madam, those were cut yesterday evening. Ah, said Miss Marple. It was a very small sound, but Inspector Hale looked at her. Sir Julian Rosemere, she learned as the morning unfolded, had been 63, wealthy, proud, and not much loved. He had dined the previous evening with his wife, his niece Clara, his nephew Philip, Mrs. Ainsworth, and Mr. Edmund Vale, the estate solicitor, who had stayed overnight because the rain had made the lower road unsafe. Dr. West had called after dinner to see Lady Rosemere, who suffered from faintness and had left shortly before 10. Sir Julian himself had retired to the library at 10:30. No one admitted seeing him alive after that. At midnight, according to the housemaid Nora, the library lamp was still burning. At 2, Philip Rosemere claimed he heard the terrace door close, though he had taken brandy and could not be certain whether he had dreamed it. At 6:20, Abel Cross found Sir Julian lying beside the old sundial in the South Rose Garden, his evening coat soaked through, one hand closed around nothing, his face turned toward the house. There were no signs of violence that Inspector Hale wished to describe in front of the family. There was, however, a doctor's opinion that Sir Julian had not died naturally. Poison, Miss Marple asked. Inspector Hale hesitated. Possibly, Dr. West is not ready to say. Lady Rosemere gave a faint laugh without amusement. How considerate of him. The inspector looked uncomfortable. There is another matter. Sir Julian's study safe was opened this morning. Mr. Vale says certain papers are missing. At the mention of the solicitor, Miss Marple looked toward the drawing room. Through the half-open door, she could see a man standing near the window, his hands clasped behind his back. He had the careful stillness of someone trying not to appear attentive. Papers concerning what? She asked. Family arrangements, Inspector Hale said. Inheritance, Lady Rosemere corrected. Let us not dress it in Sunday clothes, Inspector. The rain pressed softly against the windows. Miss Marple was shown to her room, but she did not remain there long. After removing her wet gloves and pinning her hat more securely, she came downstairs again and asked if she might see the garden. Inspector Hale, after a moment's consideration, agreed. They went out through the rear of the house beneath a stone portico veiled in dripping ivy. The South Rose Garden lay beyond a low wall, formal and beautiful even in ruinous weather. Gravel paths divided beds of late roses, their blooms bowed beneath the rain. At the center stood a sundial green with age. Near it, the wet gravel had been disturbed by many feet. They've taken the body, Inspector Hale said, but he was found there, on his side head toward the house. Miss Marple walked slowly, careful not to step beyond the stones the inspector indicated. She looked at the rose beds, the sundial, the dark windows of the library, and the French doors opening onto the terrace. Was he wearing shoes? She asked. Inspector Hale stared. Shoes. Yes, Inspector. Men so often do, even when dead. Despite himself, Hale gave a short breath. Black evening shoes, why? Miss Marple looked down at the gravel path. Rain had washed much away, but not everything. Beneath the sheltering edge of a dense rose arch, the ground was less disturbed. There, faintly preserved in the damp, were several marks, the gardener's heavy boots, a constable's tread, and something narrower. She bent slightly. The soles, she said, were they muddy? I believe so. Wet. This rain would wet anything. Yes, said Miss Marple, that is precisely what it does. Inspector Hale waited. Miss Marple straightened and turned her gaze toward the library doors. One stood slightly ajar, though a constable guarded it from within. Inspector, she said in her calm, almost apologetic voice, before we ask who killed Sir Julian Rosemere, ought we not first ask why a dead man who had supposedly walked through this rain left no clear trail from the house to the place where he died? The inspector's expression changed. At that moment, from the far side of the garden, there came a sharp cry. It was Abel Cross, the gardener, standing half-hidden beyond the rose arch where the old yew hedge met the wall. In one hand he held his pruning knife. In the other, hanging from its curved silver handle, was a woman's black umbrella. It was not wet, and tied neatly around its handle was a strip of crimson ribbon. Chapter 2. The estate where every rose faced the house. Abel Cross came no farther than the edge of the yew hedge. For several seconds he stood quite still, the rain darkening the shoulders of his old brown coat, the pruning knife hanging uselessly from one hand. The umbrella dangled from the other as though he feared it might burn him. Inspector Hale crossed the wet gravel with a swiftness that made the nearest rose branches tremble. "Don't touch anything else," he said sharply. "I haven't, sir." Abel's voice was low and rough, the voice of a man more accustomed to soil and weather than drawing rooms. "It was there, caught in the lower branches. I only lifted it because I thought." "What did you think?" Abel looked toward the house. His eyes, pale beneath heavy brows, seemed not frightened exactly, but burdened. "I thought it belonged to her ladyship." The words traveled through the rain with uncomfortable clarity. Miss Marple, who had followed more slowly, paused beneath the rose arch. From there she could see the umbrella quite plainly. It was a fine thing, with a polished black silk canopy and a curved silver handle engraved with a small rose. Such an umbrella did not belong in a gardener's shed or under a wet hedge. Nor, Miss Marple thought, did it belong to the rain. It was dry, not merely less wet than expected, but dry in the protected folds where the silk had been closed. The ribbon tied around the handle was narrow and crimson, neatly knotted, its ends cut at an angle. Inspector Hale noticed the same thing. His expression became heavy. "Fetch a paper bag," he said to the constable by the library doors, "and send for Dr. West again. Tell him we may have another matter." Abel swallowed. "Another matter, sir? No one asked you to interpret my words." The gardener lowered his eyes, but his fingers tightened around the pruning knife. Miss Marple looked past him to the hedge. The umbrella had been caught low, not thrown high or dropped naturally. It seemed to have been laid there and covered, or else pushed into the greenery by someone who knew the garden well. Rain ran from the yew above it, but the umbrella had been shielded by a thick overhang and the old brick wall behind. "How long has that hedge grown so thick?" Miss Marple asked. Abel turned to her with evident relief at a question that belonged to his own world. "Years, ma'am. Sir Julian liked it close, said it made the garden private." "Private from whom?" Abel hesitated. "From the village, I suppose." "But not from the house." He looked puzzled. Miss Marple moved her gaze slowly across the south garden. There was something odd about it, something she had noticed without yet naming it. The beds were laid out formally, the rose arches aligned, the gravel paths curving with deliberate grace. But the roses themselves, even bowed under rain, seemed somehow arranged with a common obedience. Their supports leaned inward, their trained stems curved toward the terrace. Their blooms, where not too heavy with water, faced the windows. Every rose faced the house. It was not a natural habit. Roses turned as weather, pruning, and light persuaded them. Here, human hands had persuaded them otherwise. "You trained them all this way?" Miss Marple asked. Abel glanced over the garden with a craftsman's pride dimmed by grief. "Sir Julian ordered it, years ago. Every standard, every climber, every arch. He said a rose that looked away from Rosemere was an impertinence." Inspector Hale made a small, impatient sound. "Dead men have been murdered for less foolishness, I dare say." Miss Marple did not smile. "Did he inspect them?" "Every week in summer," said Abel, "sometimes more." "From the garden?" "From the library window, mostly. He'd stand there after luncheon with his field glasses." "Field glasses?" Inspector Hale turned. Abel flushed as if he had said something improper. "For the garden, sir. He liked to see if dead heads had been missed." "Or if something else had," Miss Marple murmured. They returned to the house with the umbrella carried away between them like a small black confession. In the hall, the roses in the silver bowl seemed darker than before. Lady Rosemere had not moved from her chair. Clara stood near the staircase, one hand upon the banister. Philip Rosemere, fair, handsome, and already faintly disordered though the hour was still morning, leaned against the mantel as if the fireplace required guarding. Edmund Vale emerged from the drawing room at the sound of wet footsteps, his face arranged in concern. Inspector Hale held up the umbrella from a distance. "Does this belong to you, Lady Rosemere?" For the first time, her composure faltered. Not much, only a slight contraction about the eyes, but Miss Marple saw it. "Yes," she said, "it was mine." "Was? It disappeared 3 days ago." Philip gave a short laugh. Everything disappears at Rosemere sooner or later. Lady Rosemere turned her head toward him. "That is not helpful." "No," said Miss Marple gently, "but it may be true." Philip looked at her with a careless smile that did not reach his eyes. A philosopher among the knitting needles. Clara took a step forward. "Philip, don't." He shrugged and reached for the cigarette case on the mantel, only to find it empty. His annoyance at that small disappointment was curiously intense. Inspector Hale asked, "Did you report the umbrella missing?" "To whom?" Lady Rosemere asked. "My husband. Sir Julian did not concern himself with missing umbrellas unless he believed they concealed misconduct." "And the ribbons?" "I have never seen it before." Clara's hand slipped from the banister. Miss Marple's eyes moved toward her, but Clara lowered her face too quickly. The young woman's cuff, torn earlier at the lace, had now been hidden beneath the sleeve of a gray cardigan. Miss Marple wondered who had told her to put it on, or whether she had thought of it herself. Mrs. Ainsworth appeared then from the passage leading to the morning room, carrying a tray she seemed to have forgotten she held. Her round, kindly face looked pinched with strain. "Oh, Jane," she said quietly to Miss Marple, using the old village familiarity before remembering where she was. "I thought you might want tea." "Tea is often useful," Miss Marple said, "especially when no one wants it." The remark, being gentle, passed almost unnoticed, but Edmund Vale looked at her sharply. In the library, the air was colder than the rest of the house. A green-shaded lamp still stood on Sir Julian's desk. Its pool of light fell upon a blotter, an uncapped fountain pen, and a square of dust where something had recently lain. The safe door, set behind a panel of carved oak, hung open. Inspector Hale allowed Miss Marple to stand just inside the doorway. "Mr. Vale says the missing papers were from a sealed packet," he said. "A proposed alteration to the will, correspondence relating to the estate, and some private letters." "Private letters are a very wide country," Miss Marple said. Mr. Vale, who had followed them in, folded his long hands. "Sir Julian's private affairs are not mine to disclose unless legally necessary." "Yet you know what is missing." "I know what I placed there last evening at Sir Julian's request." "Last evening," Miss Marple repeated. Vale's face remained smooth. After dinner, he wished to review the packet alone. "Before walking into the rain." "I cannot speak to that." "No," said Miss Marple. "People very seldom can speak to the important part." The library doors opened onto the terrace. Rain had blown in along the threshold, darkening the carpet for a few inches. Miss Marple noticed, near the leg of a leather chair, a single fallen rose petal. It was red, crushed slightly at one edge, and quite dry. She did not pick it up. Instead, she crossed to the window and looked out. From there, the garden arranged itself like a stage. The sundial, the arches, the yew hedge, the wall, even the place where the umbrella had been hidden, all visible. Every rose turned toward this point as though awaiting judgment. "What did Sir Julian watch for?" she asked. Vale answered too quickly, "Imperfection." "Perhaps." At luncheon, no one ate much. The rain softened the world beyond the glass, making the dining room feel like a cabin beneath water. Silver touched china. A clock ticked. Philip drank wine, though no one else did. Clara tore bread into small white pieces. Lady Rosemere sat very straight, her black dress severe against the pale chair. Only once did the quiet break. "You should tell them," Clara said suddenly. Her words were not loud, but they struck the room cleanly. Lady Rosemere did not move. Edmund Vale set down his fork. Philip looked first at Clara, then at his aunt, and something like alarm passed beneath his boredom. "Tell them what?" Inspector Hale asked. Clara's lips parted. For a moment she seemed very young. Then Lady Rosemere said, "My niece is overwrought." "No," Clara whispered. But she said nothing more. By late afternoon, the house had grown dim enough for lamps. Miss Marple found Abel Cross in the covered walk beside the potting shed, cleaning mud from his boots with unnecessary care. "I am told," she said, "that Sir Julian ordered every rose to face the house. Lie, was there ever one that did not?" The gardener's hand stopped. "One," he said. "Where?" He looked toward the garden, then toward the library windows. Old Mrs. Rosemere's rose, Sir Julian's mother, white it was, grew stubborn near the east wall. No matter how I tied it, it turned toward the chapel path. "And what became of it?" "Dug out," Abel said, "last spring." The rain had nearly ceased. In the wet silence beyond the walk, a bell rang somewhere in the servants' corridor. Miss Marple was about to ask another question when Abel added, in a voice so low it seemed meant for the soil rather than for her. Only it came back. She turned. He nodded toward the far bed beneath the library window. There, half hidden among the red standards, grew a small pale shoot with one closed white bud upon it. Miss Marple stepped closer. Around the base of the shoot, the earth had been recently disturbed, not by rain and not by a gardener's fork. Something had been pressed into the soil there and covered lightly. Abel knelt, brushed away the damp earth with 2 fingers, and uncovered the corner of a folded paper. Miss Marple did not touch it. On the visible edge in brownish red ink were 4 words. Not the will, the letter. Chapter 3. Miss Marple meets the family behind the velvet curtains. Abel Cross drew back his hand at once, as though the paper had roots and might object to being disturbed. For a moment neither he nor Miss Marple spoke. The rain had thinned to a mist that hung among the rose stems, pearl gray and wavering. From the library window above them, the house looked down with its long panes dulled by weather, every curtain within drawn except one narrow gap where a strip of darkness showed. "Best not move it," Abel said at last. "No," Miss Marple agreed. "One should never hurry paper. It has a way of telling more when left exactly where it is." Inspector Hale came at her call, his boots striking the wet stones with heavy impatience. Yet when he saw the folded corner in the soil and the 4 words upon it, he grew quiet. A constable was sent for gloves and an envelope. The little white bud trembled in the damp air above them, unopened, as if it too were waiting. The paper, when lifted, proved not to be a whole letter but a portion torn from a larger sheet. It had been folded twice, then pressed into the earth near the returning rose shoot. The damp had softened its edges, but the writing remained legible in places, brownish red and uneven, written by a hand in agitation or by one attempting to imitate agitation. Inspector Hale read aloud only what could be made out. Not the will, the letter. He kept it where all could see and none could look. Asked the woman behind the velvet curtains. He stopped there. Abel crossed himself, then seemed embarrassed by the action. Miss Marple looked up toward the house. "Velvet curtains," she said softly. "The drawing room," Abel murmured. "Red velvet, heavy as church doors." Inspector Hale frowned. "Who wrote this?" "That," said Miss Marple, "is one question." "And the woman's?" "That is another." The drawing room at Rosemere had been made for winter afternoons and family silences. A fire had been lit, though the day was not cold enough for one, and its light moved across polished tables, gilt-framed portraits, and the deep crimson curtains that hung from ceiling to floor on either side of the tall windows. They were indeed heavy curtains, old velvet, their folds darkened by time until they seemed almost black where the firelight did not touch them. Lady Rosemere sat beneath the largest portrait, her hands folded in her lap. Philip stood near the drinks table, though Inspector Hale had forbidden him anything stronger than tea. Clara occupied a low chair by the hearth, looking at the carpet. Edmund Vale remained beside the window, half turned toward the curtains, as though their fabric held some professional interest. Mrs. Ainsworth was in the corner with her knitting untouched. Mr. Pritchard had been summoned, and stood by the door with the resigned dignity of a man who had seen families behave badly long before the police arrived. Inspector Hale placed the recovered paper on the small rosewood table. "No one touched it. Does anyone recognize the handwriting?" Philip glanced once and laughed too lightly. "At Rosemere, Inspector, one learns not to recognize many things." "Answer the question." "No." Clara leaned forward, then stopped herself. Miss Marple noticed the movement. So did Edmund Vale. Lady Rosemere said, "It is not mine." "Nor mine," Vale added. "You had not been asked yet, Mr. Vale," Miss Marple said mildly. The solicitor's face did not change, but one hand closed around the curtain cord beside him. "I thought I might save time." "Yes," said Miss Marple. "People who save time often spend truth." Mrs. Ainsworth gave a nervous little cough. Philip smiled into the fire. Inspector Hale turned to Clara, "Miss Rosemere." She looked at the fragment. Her eyes moved over the words, and for an instant the color left her face entirely. "No," she said. Miss Marple's knitting bag lay unopened beside her chair. She did not reach for it. "You said at luncheon that someone should tell us something." Clara's mouth tightened. "Clara is tired," Lady Rosemere said. "I am not tired," Clara replied almost fiercely. "I am frightened. There is a difference." The room became still enough for the small settling of coal in the grate to sound loud. Philip stopped smiling. "For heaven's sake, Clara." "No," she rose, her gray cardigan slipping from one shoulder. "Everyone here speaks as if Uncle Julian died suddenly out of a clear sky, but the sky was never clear in this house. He was afraid." Lady Rosemere looked up then. "Clara." "He was," Clara said. "Not all the time, not in front of people. But when he stood in the library window with those field glasses, when he made Abel cut back the hedge and then ordered him to grow it thick again, when he locked the safe and unlocked it and locked it again, he was afraid of something." "Or someone," Inspector Hale said. Clara swallowed. "Perhaps." "Did he say who?" "No." "Did he mention a letter?" Her eyes moved, unwillingly, toward the velvet curtains. Miss Marple followed the glance. The curtains were drawn, although daylight, pale as it was, still lingered beyond them. Their lower edges brushed the floor, concealing the skirting board and the narrow recesses beside the window. "Who closes these curtains in the afternoon?" Miss Marple asked. Mr. Pritchard answered, "They are generally kept closed, madam." "In daylight?" "Sir Julian's order." Philip gave a small shrug. "My uncle disliked being overlooked." "By the garden?" Miss Marple asked. "By memory," Lady Rosemere said. No one seemed to know what to do with that answer. Inspector Hale moved to the nearest curtain and drew it aside. Dust rose faintly from the velvet. Behind it stood only glass, rain-streaked and dim, looking toward the south garden. He checked the other. Nothing. Then, at Miss Marple's suggestion, the constable pulled the curtain fully back from the wall. There, in the narrow panel between the window and the bookcase, was a faded rectangle on the wallpaper. A picture had hung there for a very long time and had recently been removed. Miss Marple stepped closer. The wallpaper around the pale rectangle was marked by age and smoke. Within it, the pattern retained something of its original cream and green. 2 tiny nail holes remained. Beneath them, nearly hidden by the skirting, was a splinter of gilt frame. "Where is the picture?" Inspector Hale asked. No one answered. Pritchard looked toward Lady Rosemere before he spoke. "It was removed last week, sir." "By whom?" "Sir Julian." "To where?" "I do not know, sir." Philip muttered, "The attics are full of horrors. Try there." Miss Marple looked at the pale rectangle. It was not large, perhaps the size of a cabinet portrait. Whose picture was it? Lady Rosemere's face had gone very composed again, too composed. "My husband's mother," she said. Abel's white rose, Miss Marple thought, the one that would not face the house. Clara sat down abruptly, as if her knees had failed her. Mrs. Ainsworth rose and went to her, but Clara waved her away with a small, desperate gesture. Inspector Hale turned to Vale. "You knew about this?" "I knew Sir Julian had removed certain personal effects," the solicitor said. "I did not know the reason." "Did those effects include letters?" "I could not say." "You mean you will not say?" "I mean," Vale replied carefully, "that a solicitor's knowledge is not a public convenience." Philip laughed under his breath. "Admirable, even murder must wait its turn behind paperwork." Hale ignored him. "Pritchard, search the attics. Take Collins with you. Look for a small framed portrait possibly damaged." The butler bowed and left with the constable. For a little while the family remained behind the velvet curtains in a silence more revealing than argument. Miss Marple watched them without seeming to. Philip's fingers tapped the empty cigarette case in his pocket. Clara stared at the table where the torn paper lay. Lady Rosemere looked at the fire as though listening to something beyond it. Edmund Vale did not once look toward the pale mark on the wall. At last Mrs. Ainsworth said, very softly, "Jane, there was a woman." Every face turned to her. She colored painfully. I only mean years ago, before I came here, there was talk in the village. Lydia always hears things one should not. They said Sir Julian's mother dismissed a maid very suddenly. A quiet girl. Rose, I think her name was, or Rosie, something like that. Half the women in this county have been called Rose at one time or another, Philip said. Lady Rosemere spoke without looking from the fire. Her name was Rosamond. The word seemed to leave the room colder. Clara covered her mouth. Miss Marple glanced at her. You knew the name. Clara shook her head too quickly. Lady Rosemere rose. This has gone far enough for one day. No, Inspector Hale said. I rather think it has just begun. Before anyone could answer, footsteps sounded in the hall. Pritchard returned sooner than expected. His dignity cracked at the edges. In his white-gloved hands he carried a small gilt frame, empty of glass. The portrait within had been slashed across the face with a sharp blade. But it was not the damage that made Clara cry out. Tucked into the back of the frame, newly exposed where the paper backing had been torn, was the missing half of the letter. And across it, in the same brownish-red ink, someone had written a single name. Clara. Chapter 4. The Death Beside the Moonlit Fountain. Clara did not faint. Miss Marple noticed that particularly. She made a sound, small and broken, but she remained upright in the chair, one hand pressed against her mouth and the other gripping the carved arm as though it were the only solid thing left in the room. Her eyes were not fixed upon the slashed portrait, nor upon the ruined face beneath the blade. They were fixed upon her own name. Clara. The ink had darkened with age, or with something that resembled age. It crossed the exposed paper in an uneven line, too deliberate to be accidental, too plain to be ornamental. Beneath it, other words had been torn away, leaving only half-formed letters and the ragged edge of a sentence that might have accused, or warned, or pleaded. Inspector Hale took the frame from Pritchard and laid it upon the rosewood table beside the first fragment. The two pieces did not fit together. That, Miss Marple thought, was interesting. People expected torn papers to reunite neatly, like lovers in novels. But real papers, like real lives, were often torn more than once. Miss Rosemere, Hale said, you had better tell me what this means. Clara lowered her hand. Her lips were colorless. I don't know. Philip gave a weary groan. Of course she doesn't. No one at Rosemere ever knows anything until it is too late. Be quiet, Lady Rosemere said. The command was soft, but it had the effect of a door closing. Miss Marple looked at the slashed portrait. The woman in it had been painted in pale colors, almost faded to mist. The blade had cut through the face from brow to chin, yet enough remained to show a gentle mouth, dark hair parted plainly, and eyes that looked not toward the painter, but slightly aside, as if listening to someone beyond the frame. She was very young, Miss Marple said. Lady Rosemere's answer came after a pause. Sir Julian's mother was always painted younger than she was. Vanity is not confined to the living. But this is not Sir Julian's mother. The words settled with extraordinary quietness. Edmund Vale turned his head sharply. Philip stopped moving. Clara stared at Miss Marple as if she had spoken in a foreign language. Lady Rosemere's face did not alter. What makes you say that? The dress, Miss Marple replied. A companion's dress, I think, good quality but plain, and the hands. They are folded in the way of someone accustomed to waiting, not commanding. No one contradicted her. Inspector Hale bent over the portrait. Pritchard. The butler looked as if he would have preferred to be asked about a murder weapon. I cannot say, sir. The portrait had always hung behind the curtains. Sir Julian permitted no one to discuss it. Rosamond, Mrs. Ainsworth whispered. The name did what names sometimes do. It made an old shadow step closer. Lady Rosemere turned away from the fire. You have all become very fond of ghosts today. It is not ghosts who hide papers in frames, said Miss Marple. The inspector unfolded the half-letter carefully. Much of it had been stained where glue from the frame's backing had touched the paper. Only scattered phrases could be read. Not the child's fault. Beside the fountain, Julian saw. Then the single name, Clara, written separately, later with heavier pressure. Clara stood so quickly that the chair struck the wall behind her. I was not even born, she said. "Whatever that means, whatever happened, I was not even born." "No one has said you were," Hale replied. "But someone has put my name there." Her eyes moved from face to face, searching for belief and finding only fear. When they reached Lady Rosemere, something more painful passed between them than suspicion. "Aunt Alina," Clara said, "you know something." Lady Rosemere's hand moved once against the folds of her black dress. "I know that old misery, when lifted, rarely benefits the young." "That is not an answer." "No," said Miss Marple softly, "but it may be a confession of a kind." Lady Rosemere looked at her then with such weariness that, for a moment, all her pride seemed merely another garment she had put on for the day. "You are very observant, Miss Marple. I wonder whether you are also kind." "I try to be," said Miss Marple, "but kindness to the dead and kindness to the living are sometimes not the same thing." Inspector Hale ordered the frame and the papers removed. Statements would be taken again. The attics would be searched more thoroughly. No one was to leave the estate. These instructions were received with the quiet resentment peculiar to houses where authority had long belonged to the family and not to the law. Evening came early under the soaked sky. By dinner time the rain had stopped, leaving Rosemere silvered and hollow. A pale moon rose behind the thinning clouds and laid itself across the wet lawns. The house seemed changed by it. Windows that had looked blind all day now reflected light like watchful eyes. In the drawing room, the velvet curtains were left open by Inspector Hale's order, and the exposed pale rectangle on the wallpaper stared into the room like a wound. Dinner was not a meal, but a performance of one. Philip drank too much and spoke too little. Clara scarcely lifted her eyes. Edmund Vale answered direct questions with professional precision and indirect ones not at all. Lady Rosemere presided over the table with an elegance that made suffering look almost formal. Miss Marple accepted a little soup, declined the fish, and watched the servants' hands. It was Nora, the housemaid, who dropped the spoon. Only once, only a slight clatter against the sideboard. But it happened when Edmund Vale said, "Naturally, any document concerning Clara's position would have required Sir Julian's signature." Clara looked up. "My position." Vale's face closed. "I meant only in relation to family provision." "You meant inheritance," Philip said, smiling without warmth. "Philip," Lady Rosemere warned. But the word had already entered the room and taken its place among them. After dinner, Miss Marple went upstairs not to sleep, but to sit by her window with her knitting in her lap. The estate lay below in softened moonlight. The south rose garden was visible from her room, but beyond it, half veiled by trees, she could see another part of the grounds she had not yet visited, a circular stone fountain at the meeting of two paths. It was not running. Yet after midnight, when the house had grown still and even the old pipes seemed to hold their breath, Miss Marple heard water. Not much, a delicate sound, a trickle, then a pause, then a spill into stone. She set down her knitting. The corridor was dim, lit by one shaded lamp near the stair. As she descended, she heard voices below, low and urgent, coming from the direction of the terrace doors. A woman said, "You promised it would never be found." A man answered, "And you promised the girl would never ask." Miss Marple paused on the final stair. The voices ceased. A door closed softly. She waited, then crossed the hall and entered the library. It was empty. The terrace door, however, stood unlocked. Beyond it, the moonlit garden breathed mist. Miss Marple stepped outside. The fountain lay farther than it had seemed from the window. The path curved between clipped hedges and old rose beds, every wet leaf shining faintly. As she neared it, the sound of water grew clearer. Someone had opened the fountain pipe. Thin streams ran from the mouths of carved stone cherubs into the basin below. And beside the basin lay a figure. For one dreadful moment, Miss Marple thought death had returned to Rosemere before the first had been understood. Then the figure moved. It was Nora, the housemaid, crumpled against the fountain steps, her cap fallen beside her, one hand trailing in the water. Her eyes were open, terrified, and unfocused. Around her wrist was tied a strip of crimson ribbon. Miss Marple knelt carefully beside her. "My dear child." Nora's lips moved. No sound came at first. Then, with visible effort, she whispered two words. "The chapel." From the dark path behind the fountain came the faint crunch of gravel under a retreating foot. Chapter 5. Footsteps through the wet garden path. Miss Marple did not call out. A call, she had often found, warned the guilty more efficiently than it summoned the innocent. Instead, she remained very still beside Nora, one hand resting lightly upon the girl's damp sleeve, and turned her head toward the darkness of the path. The sound came again. Not hurried running, not the heavy stride of a man who feared pursuit. It was a careful tread, placed with deliberation upon the wet gravel, then withdrawn into the soft grass beyond the yew hedge. Whoever moved there knew that gravel betrayed, and grass kept confidence. The moon slid free of a cloud. For one instant the far path shone pale between the rose beds. Nothing moved. Then somewhere near the chapel walk, an iron gate gave the faintest sigh. Nora shivered violently. "Hush, my dear," Miss Marple whispered. "You are not alone." The girl's lips trembled. Water dripped from her fingers into the fountain basin, sending small rings across the moon's reflection. Her cap lay crushed near the step. A red mark showed faintly at her throat, not deep enough to bleed, but enough to speak of a hand pressed there in warning. "The chapel," Nora breathed again. "What did you see?" Her eyes shifted toward the black hedges. "Not see, heard." Before Miss Marple could ask more, the terrace door opened behind them, and a lantern beam moved unsteadily across the lawn. "Miss Marple," Inspector Hale's voice came low but sharp. "Where are you?" "By the fountain, Inspector. Bring help, please." The house awakened badly. Lights appeared first in the library, then in upper windows. Pritchard came with a rug, pale with controlled alarm. Mrs. Ainsworth followed in a dressing gown, her hair braided down her back like a schoolgirl. Tears already in her eyes. Dr. West, who had been kept at the estate by Inspector Hale's insistence, arrived with his bag and a professional irritation that vanished the moment he saw Nora. "She has been frightened more than hurt," he said after a brief examination. "Bruising at the throat, no broken skin, pulse racing, chill from the water." "Drugged?" Hale asked. "Not that I can tell here." Nora was lifted carefully and carried toward the house. As they passed under the moonlight, Miss Marple saw the crimson ribbon on the girl's wrist more clearly. It had been tied in a bow, not hastily, not as restraint, as message. Inspector Hale saw it too. "No one unties that," he ordered. From the terrace, Lady Rosemere watched, wrapped in a dark shawl. Clara stood beside her, white-faced, one hand gripping the stone balustrade. Philip appeared after them, fastening his dressing gown with impatient fingers. Edmund Vale came last. He carried no lamp, and yet his face was visible enough for Miss Marple to notice that he looked first not at Nora, but toward the garden path. "Another body?" Philip asked softly. "She is alive," said Miss Marple. "How comforting. Rosemere improves." Clara turned on him with sudden fierceness. "Must you always speak as if nothing can touch you?" Philip's expression hardened. "On the contrary, my dear Clara, everything touches me. That is why I prefer gloves." Lady Rosemere said nothing. She looked beyond them all toward the dark line of the chapel walk. Inspector Hale left Nora to Dr. West and returned to the fountain with Miss Marple, a constable and Abel Cross, who had been roused from the gardener's cottage and came with mud already on his boots, as though the earth had claimed him even in sleep. "Don't walk there," Miss Marple said quietly. The constable halted at once, one foot lifted awkwardly above the path. Hale lowered his lantern. The wet garden had kept what the rain had not destroyed. Along the gravel path leading from the fountain were several prints, blurred yet readable in places. Miss Marple's own small, neat steps, the broader impressions made by those who had come to help Nora, and beneath the shelter of the yew, a different track. Narrow, deep at the heel, turning sharply from gravel to grass. "Woman's shoe?" Hale asked. "Perhaps," said Miss Marple. "Or a man with elegant feet, which is far more common in families than gardeners." Abel gave a short grunt that might have been agreement. The footprints crossed the grass toward the old chapel path. There the earth was softer and the marks became clearer. At one point, near a bed of white lilies, the fugitive had paused. The left foot had pressed deeply into the soil. The right had twisted slightly, leaving a crescent-shaped scrape. "Lames," Hale murmured. "Or carrying something awkward," Miss Marple said. Abel bent, shielding the ground from the lantern glare with one hand. "That mark there, see, soil caught in the tread, came from the rose beds first. The south garden, same red clay, the chapel path is darker." Miss Marple looked back toward the house. From here, the library windows were visible, but dim. The drawing room curtains had been left open, as ordered, and behind the glass, the pale rectangle on the wall showed like a ghostly picture frame. "Where does this path lead?" Hale asked. "To the chapel ruins," Abel said. "And beyond that to the old family vault, locked these 20 years, they say." "Who has the key?" Abel did not answer at once. Hale turned. "Who has it?" "Sir Julian kept one, Pritchard another for formal days. Her ladyship may know of more." Miss Marple walked a few steps farther, carefully keeping to the edge. The path narrowed under ancient laurels. The air changed there. It smelled of wet stone, moss, and old leaves. Somewhere close by, an owl called once and fell silent. Then she saw the gate. It stood between two leaning stone pillars, its black iron bars laced with ivy. The gate was closed, yet one lower vine had been torn free and hung wet against the lock. Beneath it, on the stone threshold, lay a smear of pale mud. Inspector Hale lifted the lantern. The lock had not been broken. "It was opened with a key," he said. "Or by someone who knew its weakness," Miss Marple replied. Abel shifted uncomfortably. "It sticks if lifted and pulled. I've told them often enough." Sir Julian said repair encouraged trespass. "Sir Julian," Hale muttered, "seems to have arranged his estate for the convenience of murderers." "No," said Miss Marple, "for the inconvenience of truth." Beyond the gate, the chapel ruins lay in moonlight, roofless and still. The old fountain's sound no longer reached them here. Everything was hushed. Along one wall, stone angels leaned without heads. Brambles had climbed over the broken aisle. At the far end, beneath a carved rose window empty of glass, stood the iron door to the vault. Closed. On the ground before it, someone had dropped a handkerchief. Inspector Hale picked it up with his gloved fingers. It was white linen, finely made, marked at the corner with 2 embroidered letters. "Levi. Edmund Vale," Hale said. "Or Elena Rosemere," Miss Marple said mildly. "Initials are sociable things. They belong to more people than one expects." The inspector gave her a look, but folded the handkerchief carefully. They returned to the house near 1 in the morning. Nora had been put in a small room near the servants' hall, with Mrs. Ainsworth sitting beside her. The crimson ribbon remained around her wrist. Dr. West had given instructions for warmth and quiet, though quiet was by then the one thing Rosemere House could not honestly provide. In the library, Inspector Hale questioned them one by one. Edmund Vale admitted the handkerchief resembled his, but said he had lost several during his stay. Philip declared that if initials were proof, half the county should be hanged by breakfast. Clara had not left her room, according to Lady Rosemere, though no one had seen her there. Pritchard produced his chapel key from a ring at his belt. Lady Rosemere said her own key had been missing since spring. "When in spring?" Miss Marple asked. Lady Rosemere looked at her. "After the white rose was dug out." The answer seemed to surprise even herself. At 2:30, Nora woke enough to speak. They gathered by her bedside. Hale, Miss Marple, Dr. West, and Mrs. Ainsworth, who held the girl's hand. Nora's face was colorless against the pillow. "You said the chapel," Hale said gently. "What happened there?" Nora's eyes filled. "I heard someone crying by the fountain. I thought it was Miss Clara. I went out, then someone came behind me." "Did you see who?" "No." "Did they speak?" Her fingers tightened around Mrs. Ainsworth's hand. "Yes." "What did they say?" Nora turned her head toward Miss Marple, as if the words belonged more to her than to the police. "They said, 'Tell Clara the dead child is waiting where the roses cannot see.'" At that moment, from somewhere deep in the house, a door slammed shut with such force that the lamp beside Nora's bed flickered. Chapter 6. The letter hidden inside the rosewood desk. The sound traveled through the servants' corridor like a blow struck against the bones of the house. Nora cried out and turned her face into Mrs. Ainsworth's sleeve. Dr. West moved at once to steady the lamp, though it had not fallen. Inspector Hale was already at the door, his hand upon the knob, listening. No second sound followed. Only the house settling, the rain beginning again in soft, uncertain drops against the high windows, and somewhere far off, a clock giving the hour with reluctant dignity. "Stay here," Hale said. Miss Marple rose before he had finished. "I think I shall come with you, Inspector." He looked as if he might object, then thought better of it. There were nights, perhaps, when a little old lady with clear eyes was less nuisance than necessity. They found Pritchard in the passage outside the library, holding a candlestick. His face, usually arranged into perfect domestic neutrality, had lost all its edges. "It was not I, sir," he said before Hale asked. "What door slammed?" "The library door, sir. I came at once from the lower hall." The library stood at the end of the passage, its door shut. A line of yellow light showed beneath it. Hale opened it sharply. The room was empty. At first, that was all one noticed, the emptiness made stranger by the lamp still burning on the desk and the curtains hanging motionless before the black glass. Then little disturbances began to appear. A chair near the safe had been moved. One of the drawers of Sir Julian's rosewood desk stood half open. The blotter had been shifted. A brass paperweight lay upon the carpet. The terrace door was locked from inside. "Someone came in and left by the passage," Hale said. "Or meant us to think so," Miss Marple murmured. The inspector went to the open drawer. It contained ordinary things: sealing wax, envelopes, a ruler, 2 paper knives, and a small box of unused nibs. Nothing that looked worth a midnight visit. "Pritchard, who has keys to this room?" "The family, sir. Mr. Vale was given one while staying here. Dr. West may have borrowed one earlier under your instruction, and Sir Julian's own key is missing." "Convenient," said Hale. "Not always," said Miss Marple. She had moved to the desk, but not to the open drawer. Her attention had settled upon the side panel, where the polished rosewood showed faint scratches near a carved garland. Hale followed her gaze. "What is it?" "Furniture can be very like people, Inspector. The more ornament it wears, the more one wonders what plain thing it is hiding." Sir Julian's desk was a handsome, heavy piece, its surface dark as old wine, its corners carved with roses that curled around the legs. Miss Marple did not touch it at once. She bent slightly and examined the carved garland. One rose, unlike the others, had its petals facing downward. "May I?" she asked. Hale nodded. She pressed the downward rose. There was a dry little click. From the side of the desk, a narrow hidden drawer slid open no more than an inch. Pritchard made a sound that might have been shock or recognition. "You knew of this?" Hale asked. "No, sir, I swear I did not." Miss Marple drew out the drawer carefully. Inside lay a packet tied with old crimson ribbon, much faded, and beneath it a single sealed envelope. The seal had been broken and pressed shut again badly. On the front, in a hand firmer than the writing on the torn fragments, were 3 words. "For Elena only." Lady Rosemere arrived at the library door at that moment, as if summoned by her name, though no one had spoken it aloud. Clara stood behind her in a dressing gown, her hair loose over her shoulders. Philip came from the opposite end of the passage, buttoning his cuff with deliberate slowness. Edmund Vale followed, and for once his professional calm seemed to have deserted him. "What have you found?" Lady Rosemere asked. Inspector Hale lifted the envelope. "A letter addressed to you." Her face changed, not with surprise, but with an old recognition too deep to disguise. "I had thought it burned," she said. "By whom?" She closed her eyes briefly. "By Julian." No one moved. Hale broke the brittle silence. "Then you admit you know what it is?" "I know what it was meant to be," Lady Rosemere replied. "Whether time has made it into something else, I cannot say." The inspector opened the envelope. The letter inside was yellowed, the creases soft with age. A faint scent rose from it, not perfume exactly, but something dried and floral, like roses kept too long in a drawer. He read only the first lines to himself, then his brows drew together. "This appears to be written by Rosamund Bell." Clara's hand found the doorframe. Philip said, "The maid with the tragic name. How charmingly theatrical." No one laughed. Hale continued reading silently. The room seemed to shrink around the paper. The lamp hummed. Rain tapped the glass. The pale mark behind the velvet curtains looked whiter than before. At last Hale said, "It mentions a child." Lady Rosemere turned toward the window. Clara whispered, "The dead child." "Not in those words." Hale looked again. "It says, the child must not pay for what Julian saw beside the fountain." Miss Marple watched Edmund Vale. His gaze had dropped not to the letter, but to the packet tied with ribbon still lying in the hidden drawer. "What is in the packet, Inspector?" she asked. Hale lifted it. The ribbon gave way almost at once, too old to resist. Several folded sheets lay within, legal copies, a baptism certificate, and a small photograph browned by time. The photograph showed two women standing beside the old fountain. One was the young woman from the slashed portrait. The other was younger still, seated with a bundle in her arms, her face turned away. On the back, someone had written, "Rosemere must never know which child lived." Clara made a soft, strangled sound. Philip took one step toward the desk. "That is absurd." "Is it?" Miss Marple asked gently. His face sharpened. "Do you imply something?" "I seldom imply, Mr. Rosemere. I observe, and people are kind enough to become uncomfortable." Lady Rosemere sank into the leather chair beside the hearth. For the first time since Miss Marple had arrived, she looked not proud, not guarded, but old. "Eleanor," Clara said, and the use of her aunt's name without title seemed to frighten them both. "Tell me." Lady Rosemere did not answer. Inspector Hale laid out the baptism certificate. "The name recorded here is Clara Rosamond Bell." Clara stepped back as though struck. Philip stared at her, then at Lady Rosemere. No, that cannot be right." Edmund Vale spoke quietly. "Old documents are often misleading when removed from context." Miss Marple looked at him. "And new documents, Mr. Vale." His mouth closed. Hale turned another sheet over. "There is a note here in Sir Julian's hand, dated last week." Miss Marple raised her eyes. "What does it say?" Clara asked. The inspector hesitated before reading. "If she learns before the signing, Vale will ruin us all. The letter is safer in the desk than in the safe. Roses watch the windows, but not the wood." A faint sound came from the passage. Not the slam of a door this time, nor a footstep on gravel, but the soft scrape of fabric against paneling. Miss Marple turned first. The corridor beyond the library stood empty, yet the velvet curtain nearest the door trembled as though someone had passed behind it moments before. From beneath its hem slid a small object across the polished floor. It was Sir Julian's missing safe key. Tied to it was a fresh crimson ribbon. Chapter 7. The confession that sounded too perfect. The safe key came to rest in the middle of the polished floor with a small, final sound. No one moved toward it. The fresh crimson ribbon tied around it looked almost indecently bright in the lamplight, as though someone had brought a piece of living color into a room full of old paper, old wood, and old fear. Miss Marple looked not at the key first, but at the curtain from beneath which it had slid. The velvet was still now, heavy, innocent as velvet can look when it has just concealed movement. Inspector Hale crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled the curtain aside. There was no one behind it. Only the tall window, black with night and rain, and the narrow recess where the removed portrait had left its pale rectangle upon the wall. The latch was closed. The glass was wet outside, dry within. No sign of exit, no convenient secret panel, no guilty hand waiting to be seized. Philip laughed once, but it sounded more like a cough. Rosemere has taken to producing evidence on command. "Be quiet," Hale said. The inspector picked up the key with his handkerchief. Lady Rosemere's eyes followed it. Clara looked as if she had forgotten how to breathe. Edmund Vale's face had become smooth again, which Miss Marple thought was more troubling than its earlier alarm. "Pritchard," Hale said, "shut the door. No one leaves this room." The butler obeyed. His hand rested a second too long upon the brass knob. Miss Marple saw it. The key was Sir Julian's. Pritchard confirmed it at once, though reluctantly. The small nick near the bow, the estate maker's mark, the darkened teeth, all unmistakable. The ribbon, however, he had never seen before. "So everyone keeps saying," Philip murmured. Inspector Hale turned sharply. "You find that amusing?" "No, only repetitive." Clara suddenly moved to the desk and picked up the photograph before anyone could stop her. She held it close to the lamp, her fingers trembling at the edges. The 2 women beside the fountain seemed to gaze past her from their brown, faded world. The bundle in the younger woman's arms was little more than a shape. "Which child lived?" Clara whispered. Lady Rosemere closed her eyes. "Put it down," Edmund Vale said. It was the wrong tone, too quick, too intimate. Clara looked at him. "Why?" "Because it is evidence." "No," she said, "it is my life." No one answered that. Even Inspector Hale, who had little patience for dramatics, let the words remain where they fell. Then Pritchard spoke. "I killed Sir Julian." The room did not explode, it contracted. Miss Marple had once seen a pond freeze over during a hard January night in St. Mary Mead. This was like that. Every face became fixed in an instant, all movement caught beneath a thin surface. Inspector Hale turned slowly. "Repeat that." Pritchard stood by the door, white-gloved hands at his sides, his spine as straight as if he were announcing luncheon. "I killed Sir Julian Rosemere." Mrs. Ainsworth, who had slipped into the doorway and heard the words, made a small, distressed sound. Lady Rosemere opened her eyes. "Pritchard," she said, not loudly, not commandingly, almost sadly. He did not look at her. "Why?" Hale asked. "Because he was cruel." Philip gave a soft, astonished laugh, an overcrowded motive at Rosemere. Hale ignored him. "That is not enough." "I had served this house for 31 years, Pritchard said. "I watched him turn kindness into fear and fear into obedience. I watched her ladyship suffer. I watched Miss Clara." His voice faltered, then recovered. "I watched Miss Clara treated as a dependent when she should have been cherished. When I learned he meant to alter the will and send her away with nothing, I took the key, opened the safe, removed the papers, and confronted him." "In the library?" "Yes." "Went? After midnight?" "You poisoned him?" "Yes." "With what?" Pritchard hesitated no more than half a second. "Digitalis, from Dr. West's bag." Dr. West, standing near the hearth, stiffened. "That is impossible." "Not impossible," Pritchard said, "only regrettable." Miss Marple lowered her eyes to her knitting bag, though she had not brought it into the room. Her fingers, deprived of wool, folded over each other quietly. Hale's voice was hard. "How did you get him to the garden?" "He walked there. I told him Lady Rosemere was waiting by the sundial." Lady Rosemere's face drained of color. "And he believed you?" Sir Julian believed anything that confirmed his own power. It was a good answer, too good perhaps. "The umbrella?" Hale asked. "I hid it in the hedge." "The ribbons?" "I tied it there." "Nora?" Pritchard's mouth tightened. "The girl was listening at doors. I frightened her. I did not mean to hurt her." "You tied a ribbon on her wrist?" "Yes." "And the message about the chapel?" "I said it." Miss Marple looked up then. Inspector Hale saw the movement. "Something troubles you." "Oh, many things," Miss Marple said gently. "But one should not interrupt a confession before it has finished arranging itself." Pritchard's gaze flickered toward her for the first time. Hale continued. "The letter fragments, the portrait, the papers in the desk. I found them over the years. Sir Julian kept more than he knew. I placed the fragments where they would be discovered after his death." "Why?" "To expose him." "Then why confess now?" The butler's composure became almost beautiful, because Miss Clara should not suffer for what was done to protect her. Clara stared at him, tears standing in her eyes. "Pritchard, no." He bowed his head slightly but still did not look at her. "Miss Clara." It should have been moving. It was moving. That, Miss Marple thought, was precisely the difficulty. A perfect confession is like a perfect rose in a neglected garden. One admires it naturally. Then one asks who placed it there. Inspector Hale ordered Pritchard taken to the small morning room under guard. As the butler passed Lady Rosemere, she reached one hand toward him, then let it fall before touching his sleeve. "Why?" she whispered. "For the house, my lady," he said. But Miss Marple, close enough to hear him breathe, thought he said the words as one repeats a line learned by heart. When he had gone, the library seemed less relieved than emptied. Philip poured himself a drink despite Hale's glare. Clara sank into the chair beside the desk, still holding the old photograph. Edmund Vale moved toward the hidden drawer, then stopped when Miss Marple's mild eyes rested on him. "You do not seem satisfied," he said. "I am very seldom satisfied at night," she replied. "Things look too dramatic by lamplight." Pritchard confessed. "Yes, very thoroughly." "You doubt him?" "I doubt thoroughness when it arrives before dawn." Inspector Hale came back in, tired and irritated. "Well?" Miss Marple walked to the desk and touched, without pressing, the carved rose that opened the hidden drawer. Did you notice, Inspector, that Pritchard told us he took the papers from the safe? Yes, but the letter addressed to Lady Rosemere was not in the safe. It was in the desk. He may have known that. Indeed, yet he said Sir Julian kept more than he knew. A curious phrase, and he spoke of digitalis very neatly. Dr. West frowned. Too neatly. My bag was never unattended long enough. Philip lifted his glass. Perhaps the murderer is also efficient. Miss Marple turned toward him. Efficiency is often mistaken for intelligence, Mr. Rosemere. They are not the same. Before Philip could reply, Abel Cross appeared at the open library door. His coat was thrown over his nightshirt and rain shone on his hair. He looked not frightened now, but grim. "Inspector," he said, "you'd best come." Hale swore softly under his breath. "What now?" "The chapel gate is open again." "We locked it." "Aye," Abel said, "and the vault door too." Miss Marple's eyes sharpened. Abel held out something wrapped in a piece of sacking. Hale took it and unfolded the cloth upon the desk. Inside lay a small silver christening bracelet, blackened with age. Around it clung a thread of decayed ribbon. Engraved on the inner curve, faint but readable, were two words. "Not Clara." Abel's voice dropped. "It was lying on the steps inside the vault, sir, beside a little coffin that someone opened tonight." Chapter 8. What Miss Marple noticed in the silent conservatory. For a little while no one spoke. The silver bracelet lay upon the rosewood desk, dull with age and grave damp, its small curve made for an infant's wrist, and its inscription cruel in its simplicity. "Not Clara." The words seemed less written than whispered by the house itself. Inspector Hale bent over it, his face stern and tired in the lamplight. "Who opened the vault?" Abel Cross shook his head. "I found the gate swinging. Thought the wind had caught it at first, only there's no wind tonight. The vault door was ajar. I didn't go farther than the steps." "You said there was a coffin." "A little one, sir," Abel's voice roughened. "Old, wood gone soft at the edges, the lid had been lifted." Clara made a sound as if she had been hurt. Lady Rosemere rose from her chair too quickly and steadied herself against the arm. "Take me there," she said. "No," Hale answered. "You cannot forbid me." "I can and I shall. No one goes near that vault until I have seen it by daylight." "Inspector," Lady Rosemere said, and all her pride returned in one cold breath, "my family dead are not curiosities for your constables." "No," Miss Marple said gently, "but they may have become witnesses." Lady Rosemere looked at her then, and there was something in her expression that was not anger. It was fear grown old. Pritchard's confession hung over them like a curtain badly drawn. It ought to have simplified the night. Instead, it had made every object more doubtful. The key, the ribbon, the opened coffin, the bracelet. A man who had confessed should have left no need for new messages. Yet Rosemere was still speaking, and someone within it was still arranging the words. Inspector Hale gave orders. Abel was to remain near the chapel gate with Collins. Dr. West was to examine the bracelet only enough to judge whether it had recently been placed. Pritchard was not to be told of the discovery. Clara was to be escorted upstairs. At that, Clara lifted her head. "I will not be sent away like a child." Philip, who had gone very pale despite the drink in his hand, said, "That seems to be the very question, doesn't it?" Clara turned on him. "What is?" "Whether you are a child of this house at all." The room flinched. Lady Rosemere crossed to him with such quiet speed that for a moment Miss Marple thought she might strike him. She did not. She merely stood before him and said, "There is a line, Philip." He looked at her over the rim of his glass. "There has always been a line at Rosemere. The trouble is, nobody agrees which side of it they were born on." Miss Marple watched Edmund Vale. He had not spoken since the bracelet appeared. His gaze rested upon Clara with a guarded calculation that was not pity and not surprise. When he became aware that Miss Marple was observing him, he turned toward the window. It was then she noticed the smell. Not roses, not damp wool, not the faint medicinal odor that clung to Dr. West. Something greener, sharper, carried from the passage outside the library when Abel had entered. A plant smell, crushed and bitter. "Is there a conservatory at this end of the house?" she asked. The question seemed to arrive from a different world. Philip stared. "A conservatory?" "Yes. "There is," Lady Rosemere said slowly, "beyond the east passage." "Used." Hardly, Julian disliked the place. "Why?" Lady Rosemere's mouth tightened. "Because his mother had loved it." Miss Marple gave a small nod, as if that explained more than anyone wished. Inspector Hale frowned. "What are you thinking?" "I should like to see it." "At this hour?" "At this hour," Miss Marple said, "the house has fewer chances to tidy itself." They went with lamps, Hale, Miss Marple, Dr. West, and Edmund Vale, who insisted upon joining them because, as he said, any property matter might concern the estate. Philip laughed at that, but did not follow. Clara did, silently, keeping several paces behind until Lady Rosemere caught her wrist and walked beside her. The east passage was colder than the rest of the house. Its windows looked upon a strip of lawn silvered by moonlight, and beyond that the black mass of the chapel trees. At the far end stood glass doors with a brass handle shaped like a rose stem. The panes were clouded from within. Hale opened them. The conservatory received them with a breath of stale warmth. It was a long room of iron ribs and glass, dim beneath the moon, crowded with plants that had grown too freely during years of neglect. Ferns spread like green feathers from cracked urns. Vines climbed the walls and looped across the roof beams. Old orange trees stood in wooden tubs, their leaves glossy and dark. Somewhere unseen, water dripped at patient intervals into an empty saucer. Yet the room was strangely silent. No rustle of insects, no night stirring among leaves, no soft tick of pipes. The air seemed to have been holding its breath for years. Miss Marple moved slowly along the tiled path. "Does anyone tend this room?" she asked. "Able when ordered," Lady Rosemere said. "Otherwise no one." "And lately?" No answer came. Dr. West stopped beside a stand of tall, spotted flowers growing in a neglected corner. Digitalis. Inspector Hale turned. "Foxglove." "Yes, beautiful, useful, and dangerous when misunderstood." The doctor bent nearer, then straightened. "Several stems have been cut recently." Pritchard's confession stirred again among them. "He said he used digitalis from your bag," Hale said. "So he did." Dr. West's face was grave. "But this would serve as well in the right hands or the wrong ones." Miss Marple was not looking at the foxgloves. She was looking at the tiled floor. The dust there had been disturbed, not broadly, but in a narrow path leading from the glass doors to a potting bench near the far wall. There, beneath a sheet of sacking, something had been dragged recently. The marks ended at a low cupboard built into the bench. "Inspector," she said. Hale crossed to her and opened the cupboard. Inside were old seed trays, cracked labels, twine, a rusted trowel, and a small velvet curtain folded into a tight square. It was crimson. Not the heavy drawing-room velvet, but a smaller piece, perhaps once used to cover a stand or protect delicate plants from sun. Its edge was torn, and from that torn edge Miss Marple could see narrow strips had been cut. "Crimson ribbon." Clara whispered, "Then it was made here." "Perhaps," Miss Marple said, "or meant to appear so." Beneath the velvet lay a book. Its cover was warped from damp. Lady Rosemere gave a sharp breath when Hale lifted it. "My mother-in-law's garden diary," she said. The pages had swollen and curled, but many remained readable. Notations of weather, bloom, grafting, pruning. Then, near the back, the writing changed. Less garden record than private distress. Hale turned a page and read a line aloud. "Rosamond brought the child at dusk. Julian followed her to the fountain." Lady Rosemere closed her eyes. Another page had been torn out. Miss Marple leaned closer to the ragged edge. A small scrap remained caught in the binding, no larger than a postage stamp. On it were 3 words written in the same faded hand. "The wrong twin." The rest was gone. For the first time that night, Edmund Vale spoke sharply. "That diary is private family property." Inspector Hale looked at him. "It is evidence." "It may also be nonsense. Old women wrote melodramas in diaries as readily as young women write them in letters." Clara lifted her face. "You knew." Vale turned to her. "I knew nothing certain." "That is not the same as nothing." Miss Marple stepped away from them toward the far glass wall. One pane there had been wiped clean from the inside. Beyond it, through the moonlit blur, she could see the chapel path. More importantly, she could see the vault gate. From this silent conservatory, a person could watch the chapel unseen. On the narrow sill below the wiped pane lay a fresh smear of soil. Pressed into it was the mark of a small shoe heel, narrow and deep, matching the print by the fountain path. Beside it rested a torn scrap of paper. Miss Marple picked it up only after Hale nodded. The writing was hurried, recent, and unmistakably meant to be found. "Bring Clara to the conservatory before dawn, or Pritchard will hang for a murder he did not commit." From somewhere behind the thick wall of ferns came the smallest possible sound, a breath drawn in and held. Chapter 9. The night Rosemere estate revealed its oldest lie. The breath came again, not loud enough to startle, nor desperate enough to betray panic. It was simply the involuntary sound of someone who had believed themselves hidden for rather too long. Inspector Hale lifted the lantern. "Who is there?" The beam slid across broad fern leaves, dusty pots, abandoned watering cans, and the tangled shadows cast by the iron framework of the conservatory roof. Nothing moved. Miss Marple did not look where the light fell. She looked where it did not. People hiding in darkness seldom watched the lantern. They watched the person carrying it. Very quietly, she stepped toward the far corner, where an old stone bench stood beneath a climbing jasmine that had long since overgrown its trellis. "There is no need to be frightened," she said in the calm voice she might have used to reassure a nervous child or a startled bird. Silence answered her. Then a figure emerged. It was not the murderer. It was Nora. The young housemaid looked exhausted, one hand pressed against her bruised throat. Her hair had escaped its pins, and her shoes were wet with dew. She seemed almost ashamed to have been discovered. Inspector Hale stared. "Good heavens, you should be in bed." "I tried," she whispered. "Then why are you here?" Nora glanced fearfully toward the chapel path visible through the wiped pane of glass. "Because someone wanted me here." She held out her trembling hand. Inside it lay another strip of crimson ribbon. "This was under my pillow." No one spoke. "I woke," she continued softly, "and it was there, I thought. I thought perhaps they wanted me to come back." "Who?" Hale asked. "I don't know." Miss Marple looked carefully at the ribbon. It had been cut from the same faded velvet as the others, but unlike the earlier pieces, this one had something tied inside it. A tiny brass key. Not a house key. Not a safe key. Far smaller. Edmund Vale took one involuntary step forward. Miss Marple noticed. "So," she said gently, "you recognize it." Vale hesitated. "I recognize many keys." "That is not what I asked." His answer came slowly. "It resembles the key to one of Sir Julian's document boxes." Inspector Hale held out his hand. Vale surrendered the little key without protest. "Where is this box?" "In Sir Julian's private office." "There is no private office." "There was." Every eye turned toward him. Vale seemed almost surprised by what he himself had admitted. "The room behind the old accounting library," he said quietly. "Few people used it after Lady Rosamond disappeared." Lady Rosemere looked at him with unmistakable shock. "I thought Julian had it sealed." "He did." "Then how?" "I retained a duplicate key." Philip laughed softly. "Of course you did." Inspector Hale's patience finally began to fray. "You have been withholding quite a great deal, Mr. Vale." "I have been protecting client confidentiality." "Your client is dead." Vale lowered his eyes. "Yes." Miss Marple watched him for another moment. He looked like a man who had carried a burden so long that he no longer knew whether he protected it, or it protected him. They crossed the east corridor in silence. Rain whispered faintly upon the glass roof above them. Somewhere distant, the old grandfather clock marked 3 o'clock. Rosemere seemed neither asleep nor awake. Only listening. The hidden office lay behind a narrow bookcase in the former accounting room. The concealed door opened reluctantly after Vale inserted the tiny brass key into an almost invisible lock disguised beneath carved oak leaves. Dust breathed outward. The room beyond was surprisingly small. One desk, one chair, one fireplace, shelves lined with leather-bound ledgers. A single narrow window looking not toward the gardens, but toward the village road. Miss Marple entered last. Unlike the library, this room did not smell of paper. It smelled faintly of lavender. Someone had been here recently. Inspector Hale searched methodically. Nothing appeared disturbed. The ledgers were orderly. The desk empty. The fireplace cold. Too cold. Miss Marple walked slowly around the room. Her fingers brushed the polished edge of the desk. Rosewood, not as grand as the library desk. Simpler, older. She smiled faintly. Another rosewood desk. Inspector Hale gave her a questioning glance. You think there is another compartment? I think people who build one secret often build two. The drawer opened normally. Bills, receipts, old estate accounts. Nothing remarkable. Miss Marple examined the underside instead. There, beneath years of polish, someone had carved one tiny symbol. A rose, not blooming. Closed. She pressed it gently. Nothing happened. She pressed upward instead. A faint click answered. The writing surface shifted half an inch. Hidden beneath it lay a flat leather wallet. Inside rested only three things: a folded letter, an old railway ticket, and a child's pressed white rose. Inspector Hale unfolded the letter carefully. Unlike every other document found that night, this one had never been torn. Its opening lines were clear. Julian, if you destroy this letter, you destroy the last honest thing in this house. If you keep it, one day the truth will come looking for you. That day will not care who inherited Rosemere. It will care only whose child survived. The signature had been removed, neatly cut away. No name, only absence. Philip leaned closer. So everyone wrote mysterious letters in this family. No one answered him. Miss Marple examined the railway ticket instead. It had been issued 26 years earlier. One passenger, one way, destination, Ashcombe Junction. Does that place mean anything? Hale asked. Lady Rosemere looked genuinely puzzled. Vale looked thoughtful, but it was Mrs. Ainsworth who spoke. My goodness. Everyone turned. My aunt lived near Ashcombe. Miss Marple looked at her. She used to say something very odd whenever babies were christened. What? Mrs. Ainsworth frowned, searching memory. She always said, never trust the first cradle. The room became still. Philip laughed again. Your aunt was clearly eccentric. She rarely was. Miss Marple folded the railway ticket carefully. First cradle. Wrong twin. Which child survived? Not Clara. Each clue answered another. Each answer multiplied the questions. Inspector Hale searched the remaining shelves. Only ledgers. Only accounts. Until one volume refused to move. He pulled harder. The entire shelf shifted outward. Behind it lay a narrow cavity scarcely wider than a man's arm. Empty, except for one object. A leather doctor's case. Dr. West frowned. That isn't mine. The inspector placed it on the desk. Inside rested several old medical instruments. A bottle, a faded cloth, and another envelope. Fresh, white, addressed in modern ink. Miss Marple. No one had spoken. No one moved. Inspector Hale handed it to her. I think this belongs to you. Miss Marple broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet. Only one sentence had been written. You are asking the wrong question. She read it twice, folded it once, placed it quietly back into the envelope. Inspector Hale waited. Well, Miss Marple looked toward the narrow window overlooking the sleeping road. The first question everyone has asked, she said softly, is who killed Sir Julian. And I no longer believe that was the first crime." Silence settled over the hidden office. Outside, the rain stopped. For the first time all night, moonlight slipped through the clouds and entered the room. It fell directly upon the old railway ticket. Only then did Miss Marple notice something no one else had seen. The ticket had been stamped on the reverse. Not by the railway, by Rosemere Estate itself. The purple estate seal surrounded a handwritten departure time. 2 minutes after the official train had already left. Chapter 10. The morning the roses finally bloomed in peace. By morning, the rain had spent itself. It left Rosemere Estate washed and shining, as if the night had tried to cleanse what men and women had hidden there for half a lifetime. Water trembled upon the rose leaves. The gravel paths gleamed pale under a clearing sky. Beyond the library windows, the south garden waited in a silence so complete that even Inspector Hale lowered his voice when he gave his orders. Miss Marple asked that everyone be gathered in the library. No one objected. They were past objection now. Pritchard sat near the door under guard, no longer quite the perfect butler, yet still carrying himself with the tragic dignity of a man who had offered himself for sacrifice and been refused. Clara stood by the desk, very pale, the old photograph held carefully in both hands. Lady Rosemere had chosen the chair nearest the window. Philip leaned against the mantel, his eyes dark from sleeplessness and drink. Edmund Vale stood apart, his gloved hands folded over the handle of his cane. On the desk lay the recovered things. The fragments of the letter, the silver bracelet, the railway ticket, the little brass key, the crimson ribbon, and the garden diary. Inspector Hale looked at Miss Marple. Well, Miss Marple did not begin with Sir Julian. She began with a rose. Sir Julian ordered every rose in the south garden to face the house, she said. That seemed at first merely vanity or tyranny, but it was more than that. It was fear. He wanted everything turned toward him because he had spent his life terrified of what might turn away. No one spoke. The white rose near the chapel path would not obey. It grew toward the place of the old lie, so it was dug out, but roots are stubborn things, it returned. Lady Rosemere closed her eyes. Rosamund Bell did not vanish because of scandal alone, Miss Marple continued. She vanished because she had a child, 2 children in fact, twins. One died very young and was buried in the family vault under a false peace. The other lived. Clara's fingers tightened around the photograph. The first cradle, Mrs. Ainsworth whispered from the corner. Yes, said Miss Marple. The wrong cradle was named. The wrong child was recorded. It was arranged so that no one outside Rosemere could be sure which infant had died and which had been sent away. A railway ticket was created to make it appear that Rosamund left by train. But the ticket was stamped here at Rosemere 2 minutes after the train had already gone. It was never proof of departure. It was proof of invention. Philip's face had gone very still. Then who am I? Clara asked. Miss Marple's voice softened. You are Clara. That is not the lie. The lie was the use made of you. Sir Julian knew that the child who lived had a claim upon Rosemere stronger than Philip's and stronger than his comfort. He kept documents because he liked weapons. He feared destroying them and he feared keeping them. That is why they were divided, some in the safe, some in the desk, some hidden where memory itself had been curtained away. Lady Rosemere opened her eyes. They were bright with tears, though none had fallen. I took Clara in because I could not undo what had been done before I came here. Julian said she was only a dependent. I never believed it, not entirely, but I had no proof. You had more than proof, Clara said quietly. You had fear. Lady Rosemere bowed her head. Miss Marple turned then to Pritchard. You confessed because you thought you were protecting her. The butler's lips trembled once. I owed her that much. You did not kill Sir Julian. No, he said after a long pause, but I would have endured hanging if it saved her. Clara moved as if to go to him, then stopped, overcome. The confession was too complete, Miss Marple said. It explained every clue tidily, but crimes are rarely tidy while they are happening. They are tidied afterward. Inspector Hale's eyes went to Edmund Vale. Vale did not move. Miss Marple followed the look. Mr. Vale knew the truth was near. Sir Julian had asked him to prepare papers, not to acknowledge Clara kindly, but to control the revelation before it controlled him. Then Sir Julian began to suspect Mr. Vale meant to profit from it. Philip laughed harshly. Veil profit, that sounds refreshingly vulgar. Yes, Miss Marple said, blackmail often is. Vale's face remained composed, but his cane shifted against the floor. The hidden office contained a doctor's case that was not Dr. West's, Miss Marple continued. An old one. I think it had belonged to someone involved long ago, someone who helped conceal the birth and death. Mr. Vale found it before any of us did. He had the duplicate key. He knew the old documents, but he made one mistake. Hale said the ticket. No, the riband. Miss Marple lifted the fresh crimson strip tied to the safe key. The old velvet in the conservatory had faded unevenly. The older ribbons were dull on both sides. This one was bright on one side where it had been recently cut from a protected fold. Mr. Vale dropped it to make us think the house was still producing ghosts, but he did it after Pritchard had already confessed. A guilty man who has accepted a confession does not continue staging evidence unless the confession frightens him because it is false. Vale smiled faintly. A pretty argument. There is more, she said. Nora heard two voices. You promised it would never be found, said a woman. And you promised the girl would never ask, said a man. The man was you. The woman was not Lady Rosemere. Clara turned sharply. Miss Marple looked toward the door. Nora, my dear, you may come in. The housemaid appeared, frail but upright. Beside her stood Dr. West. She did not look at Vale. She looked at Philip. I was frightened, she whispered. He told me I'd be dismissed. He told me no one would believe a maid. Philip's smile died. Lady Rosemere rose slowly. Philip. Miss Marple's voice remained gentle. Philip did not kill Sir Julian, but he helped Mr. Vale after the death. He moved the body. Inspector Hale stepped forward. Philip's face twisted. I found him already dead. In the conservatory, Miss Marple said, not the garden. The silence broke open. Sir Julian went there because he had found the diary. He had finally understood the old exchange of the twins, and he intended to confront Mr. Vale before signing anything. He drank something prepared for him, digitalis from the foxglove, not from Dr. West's bag. He died in the conservatory where there would have been evidence, cut stems, a cup, perhaps even a quarrel. Philip discovered him, panicked, and fetched Mr. Vale. Together they carried him to the sundial. That is why there was no clear trail from the house to where he supposedly walked. A dead man leaves no footsteps. Philip sank into a chair. Vale said softly, you cannot prove poison by poetry. No, Hale said, but Dr. West can prove it by examination, and we can prove who cut the foxglove, who opened the office, who handled the hidden papers, and who placed that key. Vale's eyes moved to the terrace door. Abel Cross stepped into view outside it, large and silent as the earth itself. There was no escape. For the first time, Edmund Vale looked old. Julian deserved fear, he said. Perhaps, Miss Marple replied, but you killed him not for justice. You killed him because the truth had ceased to be useful to you. No dramatic confession followed, only a tired surrender. Hale took the cane first. Inside its hollow shaft was a narrow knife stained with old gilt dust from the portrait frame and a folded copy of the missing will. By noon, the house had changed. Not happily, not yet, but honestly. Philip was taken away for aiding concealment. Pritchard, though guilty of silence and foolish devotion, was spared the weight he had tried to carry. Lady Rosemere told Clara everything she knew and wept while doing so. Clara did not forgive her at once. Forgiveness, Miss Marple thought, should never be hurried. It is not a parlor trick. In the afternoon, the clouds opened. Sunlight reached the south garden. Abel Cross went quietly from bed to bed, loosening old ties. One by one, roses that had been trained toward the house were allowed to turn where the light called them. Near the chapel path, the small white bud opened at last, fragile and bright against the dark leaves. Clara stood beside it for a long time. Miss Marple joined her without speaking. Was she my mother? Clara asked. Yes, my dear, Rosamond was. And the child in the vault? Your twin. Clara looked toward the chapel, no longer hidden by rain. Then I have been mourned by the wrong grave all my life. Miss Marple took her hand, and found by the right truth. Across the garden, Lady Rosemere waited by the terrace, uncertain whether she was welcome. Clara saw her. After a long moment, she walked toward her. The roses moved faintly in the clean breeze, no longer facing the house like frightened witnesses. but turning outward toward the morning, toward the chapel path, toward the world beyond Rosemere. And for the first time since Miss Marple had arrived, the estate did not seem to be watching anyone at all.